Coming up here on today's Philadelphia Eagles Now, I want to take a look at three players currently on this Eagles roster who are contract extension candidates for Howie, Roseman, and this front office, with Eagles training camp quickly approaching. And with that being the case, if you are pumped up for the return of Eagles football, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon, like the video, and type "Go Birds" down below in the comment section, because the season is going to be here before we know it. As for those contract extension candidates for the Eagles, one of the most obvious ones, of course, is Josh Sweat, the edge rusher for Philadelphia, who's been a great player development story for the Eagles. He was the #1 overall recruit in the country coming out of high school. He tore up his knee, goes to Florida State, still had a successful career, but his draft status and his draft value kind of plummeted a little bit because teams had concerns about the knee. Eagles draft him, though, and he's ended up being a very, very valuable edge rusher for this Eagles defense over the last several years. And this offseason, there's been a lot of movement with him as an individual. The Eagles restructured his contract. Before that, it was Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick on the trade block for the Eagles at one point going into free agency. According to Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Birds gave Sweat permission to find a trade partner. Obviously, Sweat and his agent weren't able to do that. Sweat took to social media, and he basically hinted that his days with the Birds could be over. But he does return to Philadelphia under the construct of this contract here, which was restructured by Philadelphia. He will have a base salary in 2024 of $1.1 million, a cap hit of $8 million on the expiring contract that he signed a few years ago. And he's been a very consistent player. I know that the sacks haven't always been there, and year over year, he did go from 11 sacks, a career high in 2022, to 6 sacks in 2023. But sometimes I look at sacks as wins and losses for a pitcher. Doesn't tell the full story. A pitcher can go 5 of 12. But what is the ERA? What is the whip? If the ERA is hovering under 4 or sub 3, means you have a really good pitcher who's taking the bump every 5th day. And with edge rushers, sometimes it's not all about the sack numbers. It's about pressure rate, quarterback hits, and hurries. And Sweat has consistently produced in those areas. His pressure rate between 11.9 and 12.8% in 4 of the last 5 years per Sports Info Solutions. So he's been a really consistent player. And then you look at the overall stats. 6.5 sacks last year. In 2022, 11. In 2021, 7.5. In 2020, he had 6. I think one of the underrated parts of Josh Sweat's game from time to time, him being able to bat down balls at the line of scrimmage. I'm curious to see how he fits into Vic Fangio's scheme, because I think he's more of a traditional 4-3 end. Fangio going to go with the 3-4 defense, but either way, he should be able to hunt at least a little bit. And it's not like he was awful in 2023. The sacks were cut in half, but still had an overall Pro Football Focus grade of 68.3. Against the run, that's not his specialty, so not a surprise to see the grade low there at 53.3. What is his specialty, though? That's getting after the quarterback. 74.1 pass rush grade. He still had 68 pressures last year and 45 hurries, but just like a lot of the other players along that Eagles defensive line, close but no cigar as far as turning those pressures and those hurries into actual sacks. As part of his future, you do look at what the Eagles have done at the edge rusher spot. Nolan Smith going into year 2. They drafted him 30th overall 2 years ago. Philadelphia did sign Bryce Huff to a contract which pays him $17 million in average annual value. And then they did draft Jalix Hunt. It's a little bit of a contingency plan for Philadelphia, having some young players there in the case of Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, and still Bryce Huff, but also giving Bryce Huff that contract. So they give themselves some wiggle room, whether or not they want to give him an extension for Sweat or let him walk. That is to be determined. I'll tell you this, if it happens, if there's another move, we talk about it here on Eagles Now, and this is your one-stop shop for Eagles coverage every single day. We try to give you informative, entertaining, insightful Eagles analysis that involves you, the fan. We're approaching 77,000 subscribers. Help us get there and hit that sub button right now. Contract extension candidate number 2 is a player who's fallen under the radar the last couple of years, and that's Milton Williams. And I think that he is on the verge of potentially turning the corner and having a really good year in 2024. He's coming off a 2023 season in which he had a career-high 10 starts. He did have 42 tackles, but only a half sack, and he was a third-round pick out of Louisiana Tech in 2021. The video back then during the draft from the Eagles war room kind of went viral. There was a member of the Eagles front office who really didn't want to talk to Howie Roseman at the time. Howie Roseman was very pumped up about this selection, and we've seen in glimpses why Howie made that decision. Because Milton Williams has a lot of ability, and he's one of my favorite breakout candidates for the 2024 season because of the flashes that he's shown. The first couple of years that he's been in the NFL, he's really close to turning the corner, and we saw that last year. Overall PFF grade of 69.7, a run defense grade of 72.3. He can get a little bit better with the pass rush as far as the moves and the consistency at 58.8. He did tally in only 307 pass rush snaps, 22 pressures, 13 hurries, and 8 quarterback hits, 1 forced fumble. The body type, I like it. Coming out of Louisiana Tech, a little bit of a late bloomer, and he was a little bit raw as he's gotten more refined. I've seen moments where I'm like, Milton Williams can be a really good player. And at the position that he plays, the Eagles' defensive tackle spot, going to be an interesting position to kind of monitor here during training camp, preseason, and in the regular season because Jordan Davis is a huge unknown. We're not sure if he's a 2-down player or a 3-down player. I think that Jalen Carter can become a star in this league if he wants to become one. But also, Eagles are going to rotate those defensive tackles, and Milton Williams is going to be a part of that rotation. Be sure to give me a follow, by the way, on social media. I put out a lot of short-form content on my social media pages covering the Birds and the NFL. I'm at Chase_Senior on X, same handle on Instagram. Final extension candidate here for Philadelphia, number 3, is tight end Dallas Goedert. We've talked about Dallas Goedert a couple of times this offseason. Will he be here for the long haul? Could the Eagles look to trade him? Could they look to cut him to get out of that contract because of the way that that contract is structured? The Eagles, by giving Dallas Goedert a contract extension, can clear up $2.3 million in cap space by giving him a new deal. He did sign a 4-year, $57 million contract back a couple of years ago, which does run through 2025. But the final year, which is next year, is not guaranteed. At 29 years old, the Eagles could look to find his replacement. They could look to give him that extension to free up some cap space. Has a cap hit in 2025 of $11.8 million, a void charge in 2026 of $8.2. Either way, I think an extension is likely, or the Eagles try to restructure that deal because that's a little bit of a high cap hit for Goedert, his usage, and considering that the Eagles are now paying Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown in the future, and then you have that Saquon Barkley deal as well. Dallas Goedert's injury concerns certainly are there. That plays a role in this conversation. He missed 5 games in 2022 because of a shoulder injury. He missed 3 games in 2023 because of a forearm injury. Has not played a full season since 2018. What's interesting, I don't chalk him up for being all too much of an injury-prone player. I think he's run into some bad luck, and I think he's a really, really good player. I think he's one of the best all-around tight ends in the NFL. In fact, if you factor in pass catching and pass blocking, he might be number 2 behind George Kittle. The production obviously limited just because of what the Eagles have as far as their weaponry on that side of the ball. But when he has been targeted, he's been reliable, he's been dynamic and picking up yards after the catch, and he's widely respected across the entire NFL. I think he's supremely underrated just because of the impact that he has on this Eagles team, catching the ball, picking up yards after the catch, being a tough person to bring down in the open field, but his ability as a blocker, somewhat rare in today's NFL, just because a lot of tight ends are used as weapons now. They're not always used as physicality types of weapons who can catch the ball and block. And that was noticed in ESPN's tight end rankings. Dallas Goedert came in at number 7 behind Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson, and surprisingly, David Njoku, who has kind of been a frustrating case study with the Cleveland Browns because he has so much ability, but last year he finally was able to put it together. And here's what ESPN had to say in that write-up on Dallas Goedert. He's one of the few that can block at a high level and still receive, that coming from a high-ranking NFL official. He's a lot like George Kittle in that way. Goedert can make things happen with the ball in his hands. His average of 5.4 yards after the catch per reception, ranked 4th among the tight end group. Certainly reflective. Philadelphia relies heavily on Goedert for run-pass option screens and underneath plays. He has seam stretching ability, but the presence of wide receivers A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith could continue to suppress his bottom line. I love what ESPN pointed out there with how sometimes in that RPO, he dribbles out into the flat after starting off as a blocker, and then Jalen Hurts is able to hit him with that pop pass while getting some blockers out in front. It's a dynamic play in this Eagles offense. I want to continue to see that be a staple in this Eagles offense, but I want to see Kellen Moore target and utilize Dallas Goedert more as a blocker, as a pass catcher, and as a player who can fall under the radar in that little hybrid role on some of those leak outs, because those plays have been consistently explosive plays for Philadelphia, and then run him down that seam because he can open up things for everybody else. And then he's very difficult to defend with that seam ball in between the numbers. Which player on that list is most deserving of a new deal? Drop me a name down below in the comment section, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button here on Eagles Now.